Imagine a single government decision shaking two of Canada's most vital industries at once, automakers and prairie farmers, and now threatening to redraw the nation's entire economic playbook. What happens when a policy meant to protect Canadian jobs backfires so hard that it risks collapsing the very sectors it was supposed to save? And the bigger question, will Canada hold firm, or is Prime Minister Mark Carney preparing to pull off one of the boldest trade reversals in years? Stay with me, because this story isn't just about tariffs, it's about the future of Canada's economy, the survival of family farms, and whether consumers will ever see affordable electric vehicles again. It all started back in October 2024. In a move that stunned the global auto industry, Ottawa slapped a 100% tariff on Chinese-made electric vehicles. The Trudeau-era policy was sold as a lifeline for Canada's struggling automakers. The logic sounded straightforward: buy time for domestic EV manufacturers to catch up before a flood of cheap, heavily subsidized Chinese models swamped the Canadian market. But as history often shows, trade wars never come with one-sided victories. Within months, Beijing counterpunched hard, targeting not cars but crops. China slapped crippling tariffs on Canadian agriculture, hitting peas, wheat, and most devastatingly, canola with a 75.8% tariff. This wasn't random, it was precision economic warfare, aimed squarely at Saskatchewan and the Prairie provinces, where farmers depend on China as their top export market. So what began as a protective wall for cars suddenly morphed into a two-front war, saving automakers on one side and saving farmers on the other. That trade-off has left Canada stuck between two powerful lobbies, each demanding answers, each claiming survival is on the line. And here's where things get messy. For months, Ottawa's tone was rigid. Officials insisted the EV tariff was non-negotiable, that it was the shield automakers desperately needed. But behind closed doors, the pressure was mounting. Prairie farmers were organizing, warning they couldn't survive without Chinese buyers. Consider this: the canola industry alone is worth nearly 43 billion Canadian dollars and supports over 200,000 Canadian jobs. That's not just numbers, that's entire rural communities, families, and small towns whose survival depends on a crop now stranded without its largest customer. The political cracks began to show. Saskatchewan Premier Scott Moe took the bold step of travelling directly to Beijing. At first, Ottawa dismissed it. But weeks later, Prime Minister Carney publicly thanked Moe, acknowledging that outreach could open long-closed doors. Foreign Minister Mélanie Joly soon admitted something no one expected: the EV tariff was under review. Agriculture Minister Heath MacDonald went further, suggesting the tariff itself was on the table. In other words, the once ironclad war was suddenly up for negotiation. But here's the twist: while farmers begged for relief, the auto sector itself wasn't thriving under protection. In fact, the numbers tell a brutal story. By mid-2025, EV sales in Canada had collapsed by nearly 40% year-over-year. Market share for new electric vehicle registrations fell from over 18% to just 8.6% in the second quarter. Why? Because the 100% tariff didn't just keep out cheap Chinese cars, it also cut off affordable options for Canadian consumers. Suddenly, the only EVs left on the market were premium models too expensive to qualify for federal rebates. To make matters worse, provinces started pulling back incentives. British Columbia scrapped its rebate program entirely in May. Quebec nearly cancelled its own after a fierce political battle. With fewer incentives and higher sticker prices, ordinary buyers simply walked away from the EV market. What's the irony here? A tariff designed to protect Canadian automakers ended up strangling consumer adoption of EVs, pushing Ottawa to delay its ambitious 2026 zero-emission sales mandate. Instead, the government scrambled to patch the holes, rolling out relief funds for struggling automakers that were supposed to be thriving under protection. Imagine being told this policy was a lifeline, only to watch sales collapse and mandates postponed. That's not protection, that's paralysis. Meanwhile, prairie farmers continued to bear the brunt of China's retaliation. Canola futures fell 6.5%. Grain elevators overflowed with unsold stock. Families were buried under mounting debt. And the frustration was visceral. Farmers didn't want subsidies, they wanted trade restored. Their patience was running out, and their anger increasingly pointed not just at Beijing but at Ottawa. Why should prairie farmers carry the cost of protecting automakers in Ontario? Why should one industry be sacrificed for another? These are not abstract debates. They are dinner-table questions in small-town Saskatchewan, Alberta, and Manitoba. This is where Canada's trade policy faces a pivotal choice. Should Ottawa hold the line on the 100% tariff, doubling down on a protectionist wall that has left both automakers and farmers reeling? Or should it pivot to pragmatism, recalibrating the tariff in exchange for relief and opportunity? Here are the options on the table. The first path is full removal of the tariff. That would immediately reopen China's vast canola market, injecting billions back into prairie communities. It would also unleash affordable Chinese EVs into the Canadian market, reigniting consumer adoption and easing prices for families. But that option terrifies Canadian automakers, already squeezed by US tariffs and falling behind global rivals. They fear a flood of Chinese imports could crush what little progress they've made. The second path is a partial rollback. Ottawa could reduce the tariff, keeping some protection in place while making cars cheaper and signaling goodwill to Beijing. Farmers would likely see at least partial relief, and consumers would have more choices. A compromise, but not without risks. And then there's the third path, a strategic bargain. Canada could use tariff relief as leverage, demanding concessions from China in return. For example, opening the canola market while securing commitments from Chinese automakers to build EV factories in Canada. That could transform the standoff into a win-win, restored farm trade, revived consumer choice, and new jobs in Canadian auto manufacturing. Foreign Minister Joly has hinted at exactly this, suggesting that tariff flexibility could be tied to tangible investment guarantees. But every path comes with pitfalls. Political backlash in Ontario, distrust of China's reliability, and the optics of looking like Canada caved under pressure. On the flip side, farmer survival, consumer affordability, and Canada's climate goals hang in the balance. This is the ultimate trade-off, and the decision will shape not only Canada's economy, but its political identity in the EV era. So where does Prime Minister Carney stand? His messaging so far has been cautious. He's acknowledged farmers' pain, praised Scott Moe's outreach, and signaled that flexibility is possible. But he hasn't tipped his hand yet. And that ambiguity may be strategic, keeping both farmers and automakers at the table, while signaling to Beijing and Washington alike that Canada won't be boxed into a corner. Think about the bigger picture here. Tariffs were meant to project strength, but they've exposed vulnerability. Farmers, automakers, and consumers all caught in the crossfire of a policy that promised protection but delivered pain. And now, Canada has to decide, stick to the wall or turn the wall into a bridge. So let me ask you, if you were in Ottawa's shoes, what would you do? Scrap the tariff entirely to save farmers, even if it means flooding the market with cheap Chinese EVs. Stick with the policy and let farmers sink while automakers tread water. Or negotiate a middle ground that demands real investment in Canada's future. Drop your thoughts in the comments, because this isn't just Canada's story, it's a global one. Countries around the world are watching how Ottawa handles this standoff, and the outcome will echo far beyond the prairies and auto plants. Before you go, make sure to smash that like button if you found this breakdown helpful, and subscribe so you don't miss the next deep dive into the battles shaping global trade and the future of industries. And don't forget to ring that notification bell so you'll be the first to know when new updates drop. Your comments drive the conversation, and I'll be featuring the sharpest takes in the next video. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.